Princess Valera's silver hands trembled as she read the message for the 5th time. The holographic text floating above her desk remained unchanged. She was to marry a human. Not just any human, but Captain James Chen of the Human Defense Force. Her 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among her people, the Celestials. The palace's crystal walls reflected her shifting skin color, from its usual calm blue to a worried gray. Outside her window, the triple moons of her homeworld cast their gentle light on the capital city's spires, but even this familiar sight brought her no comfort. "Your Highness," her advisor, Coral, stood at the doorway. "The council awaits your response." Valera turned to face him. "Tell me again about these humans, Coral." "Everything our intelligence has gathered." Coral's skin rippled with dark patterns, a sign of concern. He activated a holographic display showing various human military operations. "Humans are unpredictable, Your Highness. In just 50 years since joining the galactic community, they have defeated 3 hostile species, not through superior technology or numbers, but through something they call psychological warfare." Valera watched the footage. Unlike the straightforward battles her people were used to, humans seemed to fight in ways that made no sense. They retreated when they should attack, attacked when they should defend, and somehow always ended up winning. "And this Captain Chen?" she asked quietly. New images appeared, a human male with black hair, brown eyes, and what her people called a muscle structure optimized for both power and speed. The images showed him in various situations, leading troops, attending diplomatic functions, and most worryingly, winning strategic competitions against the galaxy's greatest military minds. "Captain Chen has never lost a battle," Coral explained. "He specializes in outsmarting opponents, the Crixians, who pride themselves on their 15-layer battle strategies, surrendered to him after he trapped their entire fleet using just 3 ships and some asteroids." Valera's secondary heart began beating faster. "But why? Why must I marry him?" "The treaty, Your Highness. After the Drachnid Empire's recent collapse, the power vacuum threatens to destabilize this entire sector. The Celestial Concordat needs Earth's military protection, and they want a royal marriage to seal the alliance." Valera spent the next several hours watching more footage of humans. She saw them fighting in environments that should have killed them, surviving situations that seemed impossible, and adapting to challenges that would have defeated most species. Their faces were so mobile, showing so many expressions that her people's telepathic abilities couldn't interpret them all. The footage of Captain Chen disturbed her most. Unlike other humans who sometimes showed aggression or fear, he always maintained a calm demeanor. In one recording, he played a strategy game against a Mentarch grandmaster. Beings famous for their 12th-hemisphere brains, Chen won while appearing to make random moves that only revealed their true purpose 20 steps later. "How can I marry someone whose mind works like that?" Valera whispered to herself. "How can I bind myself to a species that turns chaos into victory?" That night, she couldn't sleep. The diplomatic package included information about Earth's military history. Humans had terms like guerrilla warfare, feigned retreat, and psychological manipulation, concepts that seemed twisted and frightening to her straightforward culture. As the first sun rose, Valera made her way to the council chamber. Her inner scales had hardened, a natural defense mechanism of her species. The council members watched her with all their eyes as she gave her answer. "For the good of the Concordat," she said formally, "I accept the marriage arrangement." But in her heart, she felt only fear. In 3 days, she would meet this human captain, this warrior who could outthink beings with twice the brain capacity of his species, and somehow she would have to marry him. Her only comfort was that the treaty negotiations would last 2 months. Perhaps in that time, she would understand what made humans so terrifyingly effective, or at least learn enough to protect herself from their infamous unpredictability. The grand meeting hall of the Celestial Palace sparkled under crystalline lights as Princess Valera waited for her first meeting with Captain James Chen. Her 4 eyes kept darting to the massive doors, while her silver skin flickered between shades of nervous gray and forced calm blue. "Remember your training, Your Highness," Corel whispered beside her. "Humans cannot read emotions like we can, but they are surprisingly good at noticing body language." Before Valera could respond, the doors opened. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw him. Captain James Chen walked in wearing a crisp white Human Defense Force uniform. He was shorter than she expected, perhaps only 6 feet tall, with a lean build that didn't match the warrior monsters from her intelligence reports. Most surprising was his face. He was smiling. Not the threatening baring of teeth she'd expected, but a gentle expression that reached his eyes. He bowed perfectly in the celestial style, hands crossed over his chest. "Princess Valera," he said in clear, accented celestial language. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Valera blinked all 4 eyes in succession, confused by his calm demeanor. Where was the ruthless strategist who had outsmarted the greatest military minds in the galaxy? She managed a formal nod. "Captain Chen, welcome to our world." They sat down at the diplomatic table, surrounded by advisors from both sides. A human female began discussing the wedding arrangements, but Valera kept watching Chen. He listened attentively, occasionally making notes on his datapad. Nothing like the restless predator she had imagined. Then everything happened at once. A flash of movement caught Valera's third eye. A figure in servant's clothes burst from behind a column, pointing something at the diplomatic party. Valera's guard shouted, "Weapon!" But before anyone could react, Chen moved. His movements were like flowing water. One moment he was sitting calmly at the table, the next he had crossed the space between them. He didn't attack the assassin as Valera expected. Instead, he redirected the weapon upward with one hand, while using his other arm to shield both a human diplomat and a celestial elder from the potential line of fire. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. In the same fluid motion, Chen swept the attacker's legs, brought them down gently, and disarmed them, all while keeping his body between the threat and the diplomats. The entire incident lasted less than 5 seconds. As guards rushed in to secure the assassin, Valera noticed something strange. Chen's face showed concern, not anger or bloodthirst. He was checking if anyone was hurt, helping a startled elder back to her feet, and ensuring the would-be assassin wasn't injured during the takedown. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, his voice steady and calming. When his eyes met Valera's, she saw worry there. "Princess, are you unharmed?" She nodded, still trying to process what she had seen. The speed and efficiency had matched everything in the reports about human combat capabilities. But where was the ruthlessness? The violence? He had handled the situation with minimum force, protecting everyone, even the person who had tried to harm them. "The wedding negotiations will continue tomorrow," Corel announced, trying to restore order. "For security reasons, today's meeting is concluded." As the diplomats filed out, Valera watched Chen speaking quietly with the security teams, helping them understand exactly what had happened. His movements were back to being calm and controlled, as if the lightning-fast defensive action had never happened. Valera felt more confused than ever. The reports had described humans as dangerous predators hiding behind civility. But what she had seen was civility backed by capability, strength used to protect, not to harm. As she returned to her quarters, she realized she had even more questions about humans than before. And somehow, that made her more nervous than simple fear had. Princess Valera walked through the embassy gardens early in the morning, trying to clear her mind. The past week of wedding preparations had left her confused. Captain Chen wasn't anything like she had expected, yet the stories of his tactical genius in battle were true. How could the same person be both? A small sound caught her attention. Following it, she turned a corner and stopped in surprise. Captain Chen was kneeling beside a young Siraxian child, a refugee from the recent wars. The child's natural crystalline skin had a crack in it, a painful condition for their species. "Hold still," Chen was saying softly. using the gentlest tone Valera had ever heard from a human. "This medical gel will help until we can get you to a proper doctor." Valera watched as he carefully applied the gel, his movements precise and patient. The child's crystal skin began to cloud, their species' version of crying. "I know it hurts," Chen said, still speaking softly. "You're very brave. Would you like to hear a story while we wait for the gel to work?" The child nodded, their crystal facets catching the morning light. "On Earth, we have these amazing creatures called hermit crabs," Chen began, keeping the child distracted while he treated the crack. "When they grow too big for their shells, they find new ones. But here's the really special part. They form lines." "Lines?" the child asked, pain temporarily forgotten. "Yes. When one crab finds a new shell, it leaves its old one for a smaller crab. That smaller crab leaves its shell for an even smaller one. They create a whole chain of helping each other find new homes." Valera felt her telepathic senses activate involuntarily, picking up emotional traces from the scene. There was no deception here, no hidden agenda, just genuine care and a desire to help. A medical team arrived shortly after, and Valera learned something else surprising. Chen had called them before starting treatment, knowing exactly what care the child would need. The same tactical thinking that made him dangerous in battle had been used to ensure the best possible help for an injured child. "Captain," she called out as the medical team left with the child. "I didn't expect to find you here." Chen stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "Princess Valera, I volunteer here 3 mornings a week. There are many refugees who need help." "But why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You're a military commander." His smile was thoughtful. "That's exactly why. I've seen enough war to know the importance of peace. These children are our future, all of our futures." Valera followed him as he made his rounds through the garden. She watched as he greeted other refugees by name, asked about their families, and helped distribute morning meals. Many of them were species that had once fought against humans, yet they showed no fear of him. "The reports say you conquered 3 hostile species," she said finally, "through psychological warfare." Chen paused, looking at her directly. "We defended ourselves, yes, but conquering isn't our goal. Those species are now our allies because we showed them a better way forward. Sometimes the best way to end a war is to make peace more attractive than conflict." Using her limited telepathy, Valera sensed no pride or boasting in his words, only a deep conviction. She watched as he stopped to help an elderly drachnid with their walking aid. The same hands that could disarm an assassin now carefully adjusting the device's settings. For the first time since learning of her arranged marriage, Valera felt something besides fear. She wasn't sure what this new feeling was, but as she watched Chen continue his work in the garden, she found herself wanting to understand it, and him, better. The peace conference was supposed to be a simple ceremony. Representatives from 12 species had gathered in the Grand Hall of Unity to witness the signing of the treaty between humans and the celestial Concordat. Princess Valera sat in the front row, watching Captain Chen give his speech about cooperation and mutual understanding. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, Valera's 4 eyes adjusted quickly. She saw masked figures rushing in through side doors. Someone screamed. Weapons appeared. A voice shouted, "Nobody move. This is a protest against human expansion." Before the guards could react, the terrorists had taken control of the room. They were purists, extremists who opposed any mixing of species. Valera counted at least 15 of them, all armed with mural disruptors. "The human commander and the princess will come with us," their leader announced. "Everyone else stays here as insurance." That's when Valera saw something she would never forget. Chen's entire demeanor changed, not into the battle-hungry warrior she had once feared, but into something else. His eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. He seemed to be thinking of 1,000 things at once. He stepped forward slowly, hands raised. "Let's talk about this," he said calmly. What do you really want? The leader pointed his weapon at Chen. No tricks, human. We know about your tactical mind. Then you know I can see that your third man on the left is nervous. His weapon is shaking. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. Chen's voice remained steady. And your rear guard keeps looking at the children in the diplomatic section. He has kids of his own, doesn't he? Valera watched in amazement. Chen wasn't attacking or threatening. He was observing, understanding, and connecting. Shut up, the leader shouted, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Chen took another careful step. You planned this well, but you didn't account for one thing. Look at the people in this room. Really look at them. Every species here has suffered from war. We're all trying to build something better. Including you. You're wearing a medical patch on your arm. Crixian design. They saved your life once, didn't they? The leader's hand wavered. What happened next was like watching a dance. Chen gave a slight nod, and Valera noticed human security teams had somehow silently positioned themselves around the room. The nervous terrorist lowered his weapon first, then another. The leader looked around, realizing his group was falling apart without a single punch thrown. This can end two ways, Chen said softly. With more violence, more pain, or with everyone walking out of here alive. Your choice. The leader's weapon clattered to the floor. Later, after the terrorists had been taken into custody and the delegates were safe, Valera found Chen helping the medical teams treat shocked diplomats. You could have taken them down physically, she said. I've seen how fast you can move. Chen nodded, applying a calming patch to a shaken delegate's neck. I could have, but that would have risked lives and reinforced their belief that humans solve everything with force. This way, they chose to lay down their weapons themselves. The reports called it psychological warfare, Valera said thoughtfully. But it's not warfare at all, is it? It's understanding. The best victory is the one where nobody gets hurt, Chen replied. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is show others a better path. Valera watched him continue helping the delegates, seeing him in a completely new light. The same skills that made humans seem frightening. Their ability to read situations, to think in unexpected ways, to adapt quickly, could be used not just to win battles, but to prevent them entirely. She had feared human unpredictability. Now she was beginning to understand that it might be their greatest gift to the galaxy. Princess Valera sat across from Chen in the marriage counseling chamber, feeling strangely nervous. The room's softly glowing walls were designed to encourage openness between different species. Today's session was about understanding each other's cultures and histories. Tell me about Earth, she said, her curiosity finally overcoming her remaining fear. How did humans become? She searched for the right word. So adaptable. Chen's eyes lit up with warmth. We had to be. On Earth, we weren't the strongest, fastest, or biggest species. Early humans couldn't outfight a tiger or outrun a cheetah. We couldn't fly like birds or breathe underwater like fish. Then how did you survive? We learned to think differently. When we couldn't outrun prey, we learned to track them until they got tired. When we couldn't fight larger predators directly, we learned to work together and use tools. Every challenge made us more creative. The counselor, a neutral third-party mentorch, projected images of Earth's history. Valera watched in fascination as the story of humanity unfolded. Your people faced extinction several times, she noted, her silver skin rippling with surprise. More times than we can count, Chen agreed. Ice ages, diseases, natural disasters. Each time, we had to adapt or die. But here's the important part. We learned that fighting isn't always the answer. Sometimes survival means finding new solutions. The images showed humans developing agriculture, building cities, creating art. Valera saw them fail, learn, and try again countless times. But what about the psychological warfare that everyone fears? She asked. The reports say humans defeated 3 hostile species using it. Chen's face grew serious. Those reports leave out important details. The Crixians attacked us because they thought we were easy targets. We were outnumbered and outgunned. Fighting directly would have meant massive losses on both sides. So what did you do? We studied them, learned their patterns. Then we showed them that fighting us would cost more than befriending us. The asteroid trap you heard about. Those 3 ships were carrying medical supplies and cultural databases, things we knew the Crictians valued. They chose to talk instead of fight. Valera blinked all 4 eyes in surprise. You used their own values against them. No, Chen corrected gently. We used their values to connect with them. The same way I use my tactical thinking to help at the refugee center. Understanding others isn't a weapon. It's a bridge. The counselor projected new images, human diplomatic missions, joint scientific projects, cultural exchanges. Valera saw humans working alongside the very species that had once fought them. Your people are warriors, she said slowly, but not in the way I thought. Chen smiled. We fight when we must, but we'd rather turn enemies into friends. It's actually harder than fighting. It takes more patience, more understanding, more creativity. But the results last longer. Valera felt something shift inside her. All this time, she had feared human unpredictability because she didn't understand its source. But their adaptability came from a desire to survive, while minimizing harm, even to their enemies. That's why you're here, isn't it? She asked. This marriage alliance, you could have demanded it with your military strength, but instead, we're taking the time to understand each other, Chen finished. Because that's what humans do best. We learn, we adapt, and we grow, preferably together with others. As the counseling session ended, Valera realized she was seeing humans, and her future husband, in a completely new light. What she had once seen as ruthlessness was actually resourcefulness. What she had feared as unpredictability was really creativity. And for the first time, she found herself looking forward to learning more. Valera stood frozen in her private chamber, staring at the encrypted message on her screen. Her silver skin had turned almost white with shock. What she had just discovered about her own government made her feel sick. The marriage alliance was a lie. Her intelligence chief had hidden cameras and recording devices in her ceremonial jewelry. Every private conversation with Chen would be monitored. The Celestial Concordat planned to use their telepathic abilities and these recordings to understand how humans thought, to find their weaknesses. Her hand shook as she reached for the communication panel. She had to tell Chen, but before she could, her door chimed. Princess. Chen's voice came through the speaker. May I come in? It's important. When she opened the door, she found him holding a small device. Her heart nearly stopped. It was a scanner. He had discovered the spy tech. I expect you didn't know about this, he said quietly, showing her the readings. His face wasn't angry, just concerned. Valera's skin rippled with shame. I just found out myself. I was about to tell you. She gestured at her still-open computer screen. My government, they're using our marriage to spy on humans. She expected him to be furious, to call off the wedding, maybe even to declare war. Instead, he sat down and asked, Why do you think they did it? His calm response confused her. You're not angry. Oh, I'm not happy about it, Chen admitted. But I want to understand. Fear makes people do desperate things. Your people are afraid of us, aren't they? Valera sank into her chair. After seeing how humans defeated 3 aggressive species, the council became convinced you would eventually turn on us. They thought they needed to find your weaknesses first. Chen nodded thoughtfully. And what do you think? I think, Valera paused, gathering her courage. I think they don't understand humans at all. You don't win by finding weaknesses to exploit. You win by turning potential enemies into friends. A smile spread across Chen's face, not the diplomatic one she had first seen, but a real, warm expression. Exactly. So, how do we solve this? Valera blinked in surprise. Of course, we're supposed to be partners, aren't we? Let's tackle this together. Over the next hour, they developed a plan. Instead of exposing the spy plot and creating a diplomatic crisis, they would address the fear behind it. The next day, Chen gave a presentation to the Celestial Council. He shared Earth's complete military history, including their defeats, their mistakes, and most importantly, their lessons learned. He showed how humans had grown from each conflict, choosing cooperation over conquest whenever possible. You wanted to understand how humans think, Chen said to the stunned council. Here it is, freely given. We're not perfect. We've made plenty of mistakes. But we learn from them. We adapt. And we'd rather have allies than enemies. Valera watched the council members' skin colors shift as they processed this openness. In their culture, admitting mistakes was rare. Sharing weaknesses was unheard of. Yet here was the supposedly ruthless human commander, voluntarily showing them both. Your Highness, the head counselor turned to her. You knew about this plan. Yes, Valera stood tall. And I chose to tell Captain Chen, just as he chose to respond with honesty instead of anger. That's what real allies do. As they left the council chamber together, Chen gently squeezed her hand, a human gesture of support she had come to appreciate. You know, he said with a slight smile, most humans would consider turning a spy plot into a peace initiative to be a pretty good example of psychological warfare. Valera found herself laughing. Perhaps human unpredictability wasn't so terrifying after all. Valera stood on her favorite balcony in the Crystal Palace, watching the triple moons rise. The original peace treaty lay dissolved on her desk inside. The spy plot had made its terms invalid. Now she had a choice to make. Your Highness, Coral approached quietly. The council has sent new terms for a different arrangement. They suggest a trade agreement instead of a marriage alliance. You wouldn't have to. Marry the human. Valera finished, her silver skin shifting to a thoughtful blue color. Tell me, Coral, what do you think of Captain Chen now? Her old advisor was silent for a moment. He is not what we expected. When he exposed our spy plot, he could have demanded severe penalties. Instead, he turned it into a chance for better understanding. It was very human of him. Valera smiled at those words. 2 months ago, human had been almost an insult in their culture. Now it was becoming a term of respect. A small commotion in the garden below caught her attention. Chen was there, teaching a group of young celestials and human children a game called soccer. Her heart warmed as she watched him patiently explain the rules, encouraging teamwork between the species. Did you know, she said to Coral, that humans have a saying, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Chen told me that yesterday. An interesting philosophy, Coral admitted. Very unpredictable. Valera laughed. Yes, exactly. That's what makes them special. When faced with a problem, humans don't just choose from existing solutions. They create new ones. She turned to face her advisor fully, all 4 eyes bright with conviction. The original treaty was about fear. The council wanted protection from humans, so they arranged a political marriage. But now I understand something important. What is that, Your Highness? Humans don't want to be feared. They've spent their entire history learning to turn fear into understanding, enemies into friends, problems into opportunities. She gestured to the garden, where the children were now playing together, their different colors and forms blending as they ran and laughed. That's their real strength. Coral watched the scene below. And what does this mean for your choice? Valera's skin shifted to a deep, confident gold, a color rarely seen in their species. It means I'm going to do something unpredictable. She spent the next hour writing 2 messages. The first was to the council, declining their new trade agreement. The second was to Chen, asking to meet in the palace gardens. When she found him there, he was sitting on a bench, looking up at the moons. Beautiful evening, he said as she approached. James, she said, using his first name for the first time. The original treaty is void. I know. He turned to face her, his expression gentle. Whatever you decide, I want you to know these past 2 months have taught me so much about your people. I'm grateful for that. Valera sat beside him. I was terrified of you at first. I thought humans were ruthless warriors hiding behind smiles. But now I understand. Your smiles are real, and your strength isn't in being ruthless, but in being adaptable. And what do you think now? He asked softly. She reached out and took his hand, a human gesture she had come to appreciate. I think I want to marry you. Not for a treaty, not for politics, but because I want to learn more about your way of seeing the world, if you'll have me. Chen's smile lit up his whole face. Now who's being unpredictable? Under the triple moons, Valera realized she no longer feared human unpredictability. Instead, she looked forward to a lifetime of learning new ways to solve problems, create solutions, and build bridges between their peoples. Together, the grand ceremony hall was filled with representatives from 20 different species. Some had once been enemies of humans, others had been afraid of them. But today they all gathered to witness something unprecedented: the wedding of Princess Valera and Captain James Chen. Valera's silver skin glowed with happiness as she prepared for her speech. The traditional ceremony was complete, but she had requested this moment to share something important. When I first learned I was to marry a human, she began, her voice clear and strong. I was terrified. Our reports called them ruthless warriors, unpredictable, dangerous. She paused, looking at Chen with all four eyes shining. And they were right, but not in the way we thought. The hall was silent, every species listening intently. Yes, humans are unpredictable, but that's because they refuse to be limited by what seems impossible. Yes, they are dangerous, to ignorance, to hatred, to the idea that different species cannot understand each other. She gestured to the diverse crowd. Look around this room. 10 years ago, the Crixians and humans were enemies. Now they work together on scientific projects. The Drachnids once feared human military might. Today, they run joint peacekeeping missions. Chen stood beside her, his gentle smile encouraging her to continue. We thought humans conquered through psychological warfare, but that was our mistake. We were seeing their greatest strength as a weapon. Humans don't win by fighting. They win by understanding, by adapting, by showing others a better way. Valera touched the simple silver ring on her finger, a human tradition she had come to love. My husband taught me that strength isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being willing to learn, to change, to grow. Humans call themselves explorers, but they don't just explore space. They explore possibilities. In the audience, she saw several species representatives nodding, their own experiences with humans matching her words. The greatest power humans have isn't their adaptability, their tactical thinking, or even their creativity. It's their choice. Every time they could choose violence, they try to choose understanding. Every time they could choose dominance, they try to choose cooperation. Chen stepped forward, taking her hand in a gesture that now felt natural and right. I stand before you not as a princess who married for politics, but as someone who learned to see beyond her fears. Humans aren't ruthless. They're relentless in their pursuit of better solutions. They're not warriors who hide behind smiles. They're people whose strength comes from genuine kindness. Valera's skin shifted to a new color, a swirling pattern of silver and gold that reflected her mixed heritage and hopes for the future. So yes, be careful around humans, she said, a slight smile playing on her face. Be careful, because they might show you a whole new way of thinking. Be careful, because they might turn your prejudices into understanding. Be careful, because they might convince you that the impossible is worth trying. She turned to Chen, speaking directly to him now. I'm no longer afraid of human unpredictability. Instead, I look forward to a lifetime of learning new ways to solve problems, create solutions, and build bridges between all our peoples. As applause filled the hall, Valera saw something remarkable. Species that had once been bitter enemies were congratulating each other. Former adversaries were sharing jokes. Young diplomats from different worlds were eagerly discussing exchange programs. The old intelligence reports weren't wrong about humans changing the galaxy. They just hadn't understood that the change would come not through conquest, but through connection. Not through fear, but through understanding. And as she looked at her human husband smile, Valera knew she was part of something greater than a political alliance. She was part of humanity's greatest victory, turning fear into friendship, one relationship at a time.